Chris Godinez, licensed professional counselor, also the host of We Need to Talk on every Sunday at noon, Arizona Mountain Standard Time on YouTube, and then I post it back up to Facebook. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. If you feel you need a therapist, please go to Google, type in therapy, your city, Psychology Today will pop up. Click on that and it will have all of the therapists in your area. Also, the views and opinions stated herein are mine and mine alone. They do not represent the ACA, the APA, or any other damn therapist for that matter. Boom. So, had a wonderful time in Tacoma and Olympia. It was very cool, very awesome to meet everybody. I really, really enjoyed it. I love meeting you guys. So this was very, very awesome and very cool. And it was so much fun doing the meet and greet because it was great to get a group of women together that could come together and support themselves and then continue to support each other once I'm peace out. So that was awesome. That's why I like doing the meet and greets, because I like to get people together and have everybody understand you're not alone. You're not alone, and there is support out there. It's just we need to find each other. So that was really cool. If you want me to come visit your area, please contact Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at mercury.com. Let them know what city you are in and where you are and that you'd like me to come visit. Once we get 10 people or more, we can start booking tours. So that's really cool, and I'm very, very excited. So there that is. Okay. I think that's all of that. Also, if there's ever any problem, okay, like if there's a change in venue or whatever, I have no control over that. That is my management company. So if you need to get a hold of them, again, any complaints or anything goes to Chris at mercury.com. So, and I do apologize if there was any problems with changes of venue, etc. So we have no control over what, people decide to suddenly do. So anyway, there that is. So that's that. All right. First question. All right. Do borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder switch sexual preference straight to bi, to gay, and back again? That is actually more of a borderline trait. So what that is that people with borderline personality disorder, when they have met the full criteria, and you only need 5 of the 9 in order to have full-blown personality disorder, either with narcissism or borderline. What that is it's a inability to know who they are. So in other words, there's no stable sense of self. So they switch from straight to bi to gay to back again to over here to up to here to over here to this to that. They try on different personas and they're trying to figure out who they are because there's no sense of self. That's the problem. And it's because borderline is rooted in trauma. So whatever trauma happened at a very early age, and it interferes with the child's ability to have a sense of who they are in the world. So it's not safe. So whoever they are is not safe. And so they're constantly switching and trying on different ones to see what's going to work. So yeah, that's traditionally, that's a more borderline trait than it is a narcissistic trait. And what will happen is the switching will occur, and instead of taking personal responsibility for what's going on, they project outwards and they blame, they shame, they guilt, they rage, they do whatever because there's no emotional regulation. It's like I said, borderline personality disorder is rooted in trauma. Narcissism is not. So, and I know that there's people out there trying to say that narcissism is rooted in trauma. No, it is not. So borderline is, however, and borderline you can work with if it's in the early stages of it and or the person is really truly ready to work on themselves. But it takes a willingness to confront the trauma, the mistaken thoughts, mistaken beliefs, and to really deal with the internal chaos that this particular disorder has this person go through. Because the reason it's called borderline is because not only does it have traits of all 10 major personality disorders, it borders on psychotic thinking, and it's very chaotic for the person that has this disorder. It's very traumatizing, re-traumatizing, and it is rooted in trauma. So good books to help with borderline personality disorder would be The Borderline Survival Guide by Chapman and Gratz. Another one is CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. That's a great book. It'll be very triggering. So get with a good therapist. Make sure you have support. The Self-Esteem Workbook by Schiraldi. Again, so if you're working on trauma, you need to work on the trauma, you need to work on self-esteem, and you need to work on boundaries. So The Disease to Please by Harriet Breaker. So this is what's going on with somebody with borderline that keeps switching, straight to gay to bisexual to gay to straight to this to that, is they don't know who they are, and they're trying to figure out who they are. And it's really traumatizing for them because they don't know. So, but that does not excuse the behavior of taking it out on somebody else. So that's why I'm saying it's like if your partner is doing that and they're blaming you, you gotta have good, strong boundaries and go, nope, I'm not taking the blame for this. This is something you're working on. How about you get into a good DBT therapist and work on you, and work on the trauma. So there is that. I hope that answers that question. So remember, with any disorder, you have to meet the criteria. And with both narcissism and borderline, it's 5 of the 9. And so that's that. So the other question is, can a quiet borderline, is that only traits up? No, they can meet 5 of the 9 criteria and still have the archetype of quiet borderline. So in the different borderlines, okay, and I'm going to talk about quiet and hermit specifically because people have asked about those two. In the different archetypes of borderline personality disorder, there is the quiet ones. So the quiet ones take it out on themselves. They tend to internalize the turmoil. They tend to internalize the angst and the anger and the sadness and the hurt and everything else. And they take it out on themselves. And they tend to be cutters because they don't know how to cope with the very, very strong emotions that they are feeling. They tend not to take it out on other people. They take it out on themselves. So with quiet borderline, it's a little easier to work with them because the ego is not so solidified that they are determined that it's not them and it's everybody else, which is what happens when you get to the witch and the queen. So with quiet borderline, it can be full blown, and if the person with the disorder is willing to work on themselves and willing to confront the fear and willing to confront the trauma and willing to confront their own behavior and own it, they can get better. If they work on themselves, if they refuse to use the tools, if they refuse to go to counseling, if they refuse to take responsibility for their own actions and their own emotions, then there is no hope. And that goes for anybody. So there that is. So that is quiet borderline. Quiet borderlines tend to take it out on themselves. And they are a little easier to work with because there's a little bit more space there that's not filled up with ego, that's not filled up with the psychotic thinking. Because remember, it borders on psychotic thinking. So there's a little more space there to work with them. So there's a little bit more hope at that end of the spectrum. Hermits are kind of correlated to the covert narcissist. So in narcissism, you have the overt, the covert, and the communal, okay? In borderline, there is the quiet, the hermit, the queen, and the witch. So with hermits, they tend to be the martyrs. They tend to be the poor me, I'm a victim, nothing you do is ever right, nothing you do is ever good enough, I suffer all the time and it's your fault, and blah, 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 blah. They're like the perpetual victims, okay? And that's kind of what coverts do, except they're a little sneakier about it, and they're a lot more calculated, I think is a good word to put. So it's like they constantly frame themselves in narcissism. The coverts frame themselves as the victim, but they always, always, always make sure that there's an agenda behind it and that they, in their minds, come out smelling like a rose. And it's like, yeah, no. With the hermit, it really is this mistaken thinking that they're always the victim, that nobody is ever doing enough for them. It's never good enough. It's all of this stuff. And it's very toxic. It's very toxic to be around because, if you're with somebody that is perpetual victim, and the only thing I can say is that with the narcissist, it's intended to harm somebody else. With the borderline, it's a maladaptive way of trying to get whatever attention or help or whatever that they need. They just don't know how to ask for it. And it's not healthy. And it's very much the martyr. It's like, I do all of this for you and you never do anything for me and I'm always the victim and, I go above and beyond and blah, 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 blah. It's almost like, it's like codependency kind of, but like to an nth degree. And they play it to the absolute hilt. So that is the hermit borderline personality disorder archetype. And like I said, it coincides with the covert narcissist in that they both play the victim, but with the covert narcissist, their agenda is to make other people look bad. With the borderline, their whole thing is they just need help. They just want help. They just don't know how to get it. So they do the whole victim thing, and they don't understand that that ends up pushing people away. So it's a maladaptive behavior is what it is. Okay, I hope that answered those two questions. Okay, what is the difference between full-blown disorder and traits of? Okay, so the difference between full-blown disorder and traits of is that every single diagnosis has criteria that has to be matched. So if the person has 5 of the 9, that's full-blown. So that's either in narcissistic personality disorder or in borderline personality disorder. You just need to meet 5 of the 9. So there's 9 criteria. If you meet 5 of them, you've got full-blown. So there that is. Traits of is anything less than that. So 4 traits, you've got traits of. 3 traits, you've got traits of. That kind of thing. So that's what that means. It has no correlation to the different archetypes. It doesn't mean that quiet down here is less than, say, the queen or the witch up here. No, it just is a different archetype. So you can be quiet and have 5 traits of, or have 5 of the criteria, which means you have full-blown. So I hope that answered that question. Okay, totally different topic. What is a furry? So somebody asked me, okay, is it normal to go to Comic-Con and dress up? Well, yeah, it is. I mean, I've done Comic-Con for years, and I always dress up. Well, usually. This last year I didn't, but usually I dress up. I'll either go as a Captain America 1940s, chick with the whole victory rolls, or I've gone as a saloon girl. I've gone, it's from Serenity, that type of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's fun to dress up. It's like Halloween, it's like, it's normal as long as you recognize this is not who you really are, So what furries are, my understanding is that there's a whole subset culture that enjoys dressing up and having sex as their character, which is a furry, which, hey, whatever floats your boat, as long as everybody's consensual, I don't care. The only time that can get into a mental health issue is if you lose yourself. That's it. So a furry is somebody who dresses up as I believe, an anime character. That I'm not really sure. I've never been into anime, so I couldn't tell you. I mean, I'm old school. So, but they dress up as a character and they have relationships as that character and they stay in that costume and all of that stuff. And that's a subset. And, as long as it's not hurting anybody and it's all consensual, I don't care. Then it's not a problem. It's only a problem if it's not consensual or if somebody is losing who they are. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, talk more about narcs who enjoy positions of power. We've got some narcissists that are on our HOA. What do we do? Oh, God. So, okay, so here's the thing. Narcissists very much are enthralled with power. They very much are attracted to positions of power. So you will often find them running for city council or running for the HOA board or, in some position where they can tell other people what to do. They enjoy that. Most healthy, normal people, if they do decide to run for city council or want to be on the HOA board, they're not doing it to tell other people what to do. They're doing it to try to make the world a better place, okay? But when you've got a narcissist on a board, on an HOA board, or a narcissist in a city council, it's all about their own aggrandizement. I just probably said that completely wrong. Aggrandizement? Yeah. Anyway, it's about them, their wants, their needs, their genitalia, etc., etc., etc. So you can kind of tell because when you've got a good HOA board, they're fair, they're reasonable, they're willing to listen to people, and they're willing to work with people. So that's how you know you've got a good HOA board. If you've got an HOA board where somebody is, pounding their shoe on the desk, ooh, yeah, that's a Russian reference right there to Nikita, what's his name? But yeah, he would pound his shoe on the desk and, huff and puff and needed to be, acknowledged as being powerful and this, that, and the other thing. Khrushchev. That's who it was, Nikita Khrushchev, in the 1960s. So somebody who is a narcissist is going to be pounding their fists on the desk and I'm in charge and you need to listen to me and I'm not going to listen to you and this, that, and the other thing. So that's kind of how you know you're dealing with a narcissist on the board. The only thing you can do at that point is vote them out. you know, kind of like with the city council or, you know, the government in general. You vote them out. You just don't play the game and you just vote them out. Is it miserable while they are in charge? Yeah, you betcha, because they're all about me, I, more, my genitalia. That's really what a narcissist is all about. So yes, they are attracted to positions like HOA. They are attracted to positions where they think they have power. So you just kind of watch the behavior. So again, actions and words have to match. If the actions and the words don't match, you are probably in the presence of somebody who is disordered and probably an abuser. So what you can do is, if you can get enough neighbors together to have this person, what am I thinking? A junta, you know, overthrown, thrown out. You could probably do that. So what to do if you're dealing with a neighbor that's crazy? Okay. You know, it may be a personality disorder. They may have psychosis. You know, it's hard to tell what's going on with people unless you get them in for a psych eval. So, if you're dealing with a neighbor that is demanding and constantly, like, you know, your garbage can is out 2 seconds longer than it needs to be and this, that, and the other thing, you're probably dealing with somebody that's got incredibly black and white thinking, which is not healthy or normal. They may be psychotic, they may not be narcissistic, and you got to be very careful because you don't know what the issue is. You don't know what the problem is. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing. So you just kind of do the best you can, and if it gets crazy, though, you may need to consider either, you know, filing a restraining order against them, or you may want to consider moving. You know, I mean, it's just, there are crazy people everywhere. There are, and there are people that love to stick their nose in other people's business where it does not need to be. But if you're dealing with somebody who is psychotic, then you got to be careful because you don't know what the voices in their head are telling them, which leads me into my next subject. What is schizophrenia? Okay, schizophrenia is a mutation of the 23rd genome. So we've got all these little genomes and stuff. And so there's the 23rd genome, and somehow a retrovirus toggles it on. Okay, and that usually happens. The reason why it's consistent in its pathology is that it happens when the hormones start hitting. So the onset, you can have early onset. You can have 6-year-olds with schizophrenia. You can. It's rare. It's really, really rare. You can also have 40-year-olds that suddenly develop schizophrenia. That too is very rare. So it's either early onset, late onset. Typical onset is between the ages of 16 and 28. And this is where the hormones really start ramping up and the brain chemistry is still, you know, changing and evolving because our brains do not finish developing until the late 20s, you know. So schizophrenia is a mutation of the 23rd genome. It gets toggled on by a retrovirus, and it interferes with the way that the brain is able to process information. So, for example, and it's kind of hard to explain here because it's actually fairly quiet where I am right now. So, for example, I've got a heater going on back behind me, so there's a little background noise back there. So the way I explained it to people when I was talking to them at the meet and greet was, okay, you know, we've got the music going on, we've got the heaters blowing, we've got people talking, we've got all of this. A normal brain, bunny ears, is able to process all of this information and separate out what is what. Okay, so like, you know, your brain is able to just automatically go, oh yeah, there's a heater in the background. Oh, there may be music playing. Oh yeah, people are talking over here, blah, 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 blah. What happens with a brain that has got the mutation of the 23rd genome is it's unable to process all the incoming information and it gets scrambled. Really scrambled. And usually the way I've seen schizophrenia present itself in the very, very beginning is just whispers. It's like whispering, 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 and it gets louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. And that's usually what ends up happening is the brain is unable to process, and so it makes sense of it by, and I'm really dumbing this down, guys, so it makes sense of it by, you know, having voices explain what's going on. So usually, traditionally, and this is what I have seen, you have literally evil on one side, good on the other, and they're both screaming at each other non-stop, okay? And it's impossible for the person to then listen to somebody in front of them giving them, you know, instructions or commands or whatever, because they're literally, you can tell, their eyes will be going to whatever side is talking, and they're listening to whatever side happens to be louder at the time. So when I was working at the homeless shelter, that's how I could always tell when I was dealing with somebody that was, floridly psychotic, is because their eyes would be listening and listening and listening, and they were unable to focus. And, and it makes sense why every once in a while, we hear about somebody homeless or a mentally ill person being killed by police, because the police are giving them commands and they're not complying. It's because they're listening to God and Satan going at each other, and they can't hear what's going on out here. And if you throw in a visual hallucination, so there's auditory, which is what I'm talking about, auditory hallucinations, which is where you have God and Satan going at it. Visual hallucinations, so a person in front of you, their face will suddenly morph into a demon, or the clock will suddenly read "die now," or shadows will suddenly appear, and it's very scary. It is really, truly terrifying to have visual and auditory hallucinations. And it is a very scary disease. So what the mood stabilizers do, what the antipsychotics do, all they do is quiet the voices, and they can stop some of the hallucinations. It never really fully goes away. It's not a cure. There is no cure, unfortunately, right now. I would love it if they could find a cure for this. This would be wonderful. So all that the antipsychotics do is they just quiet things down enough so that the person can function. It doesn't ever really go away. Maybe it goes back to the whispering. And the problem with antipsychotics and with mood stabilizers, etc., is their efficacy is only 3 to 5 years. So every 3 to 5 years, the person with schizophrenia has to go back in and find something else that will work, and pray to God that it lasts 5 years, And it's hard to keep them on the medication because, unfortunately, the voices lie to them and say things like, "Oh, you're being poisoned. You're being poisoned." There's a lot of paranoia. So there's paranoid schizophrenics. So in paranoid schizophrenics, everything is a danger. Everything's out to get them. Everything's harmful. Everything's frightening. Everything's this. Everything's that. What gets really dangerous is when somebody has got command hallucinations. Now, that's what my Uncle Jack used to have. He would have command hallucinations. He had schizophrenia. And what would happen is he would be on one side of the street, and there'd be a couple of people on the other side of the street talking, and the voices would tell him that they were talking about him, even though he didn't know them from Adam. And so he'd march across the street and punch one of them in the face. He was always in trouble, always in jail, always in the mental hospital, always, suffering. So, and getting him to stay on medications was like pulling teeth, because the voices would tell him, "You're being poisoned, you're being poisoned, you're being poisoned." And that is common for people with schizophrenia to think that that's one of the command hallucinations, or one of the voices that they often get. So that is schizophrenia. It is a mutation of the 23rd genome that gets toggled by a retrovirus. Onset can be anywhere between the ages of 16 and 28. Early onset can be as early as 6. Late onset can be as late as the 40s. But those two are very rare. So the usual time is between 16 and 28. It can be managed, though, with the proper medication. But you must have a caseworker that's going to help you. You've got to have somebody that's willing to help you with your meds. And, housing and a job and everything else. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult, but not impossible. So you can manage it. You can. It just takes a lot of work, and it takes recognizing when things are going south. My phone is ringing, so I'm going to cut this video off. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.